The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes and suddenly everything seems darker, less lively, and you lose your motivation to get out of bed.
If you struggle with depression, you're not alone. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, and no matter the time of year, it may affect your behavioral or physical ability to live a happy life.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, we understand what you're going through, and we're here to help. Our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round. We work every day to eliminate stigma, combat mental illness and substance use disorders, and advance mental wellness.
If you or someone you love needs help, you are not alone. Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.
Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, here we go. Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live. So you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. And I think we have a caller hanging on. I'll grab that caller just a second.
Yes.
Our number here again is area code 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We don't have Norm MacArthur here today. He's out there collecting money from all of you out there in the world and whatnot. So we won't see him until Wednesday. But we do have our citizen of the 21st century, Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. He's our engineer. Thanks, Willie, for so much that you do for us.
Yes, we do. We have a caller, and I want to welcome everybody to Living for the People with L. Nathan here. Call in, of course, 716-878-5104. Also, you can check out our Facebook stream on WBNY 91.3 FM.
So you know we still got a lot of balls up in the air, right? You know, all that debt ceiling stuff and all the wrangling and you know, politicking and so on. When they got done with what they call the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which was the bill that represents the increase of the borrowing rate for the federal government, there's still balls up in the air. And we'll talk a little bit about that during the course of today's program. But I want to grab this caller real quick. Hi, caller, are you there? Hello, caller, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep, go ahead, caller.
Yeah, you can talk, caller.
I don't know. Did we disconnect?
I don't know. Yeah, I heard him, and
I heard you.
and then I don't know what happened. All right,
caller. I hope you're there. If somehow we disconnected from you, just call right back.
Yeah, he sounds like. Yeah, he sounds like he's there.
Oh, sounds like you're here.
Just talk to us.
Yep.
And maybe he's listening to the radio or something.
No, don't listen to the radio. Just listen. Just you and I talk. How you doing out there?
On the phone.
How you doing out there?
Yeah, I think he's listening to radio or something.
Hello, caller. Are you there?
All right, call back, sir. Maybe he'll get this.
I think he was connected, but
yeah, I hear stuff in the background. So it's like he's listening to the radio.
Yep, there he is. He's calling back right now.
Back.
Okay,
let me get him.
Right. So while we're waiting for our caller to get connected, I wanted to talk about what's in front of us. You know, the next step in this process.
Oh no, don't put yourself on hold. You keep talking. We heard you talking.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
The next step in this process is the appropriations process. So now that they've agreed on how much they can borrow in order to pay for the things that we've already purchased for our government, the next stage is budgeting for the next year. How much money are we going to appropriate from our public treasury for us to be able to run the operations of government over the course of the next year. The fiscal year for the federal government starts October 1 of each year and September 30th of the following year. So that process, which is really the process where if they were concerned about spending, that's where you should have put your efforts, not on the
Hello, Nathan. This is Bill Bastock.
Hey, Bill,
Reform ally of yours.
How you doing, Bill?
I wanted to update you on the New York State Commission on Prosecutorial Conduct, which should be up and running shortly.
Okay.
And right now they're looking to hire a full-time administrator.
Is that going to be you?
Capability to direct an office of lawyers and investigators.
Uh-huh.
That will take complaints from the public and from defense lawyers and others regarding alleged prosecutorial misconduct, i.e. tricks in the courtroom by district attorneys and those who work underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to awaken the public about the Challenging Wrongful Convictions Act.
Mm-hmm.
Which will be an historic act that will make it much easier for those who feel they've been wrongfully convicted to file a 440 and have their conviction reviewed.
And Bill, talk a little bit about that to
public
the
defense support as well.
Yeah, Bill, talk a little bit about
We're
that.
trying to encourage Senator Kennedy and Senator Ryan to support that bill.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on the bill yet. There are 33 senators supporting the bill, and we're trying to get the Buffalo delegation solidly behind that.
So, Bill, talk a little bit about...
This is Bill Bastock. What could happen to you. Nathan, if you could give me a call after your program at 585-503-6826, that would be great.
585-503-6526. Okay, Bill. I appreciate you, man. I'll give you a call when I get done with the program.
All right. I don't know if you can.
Yep. It sounds to me like he can talk, but he can't hear us.
He can't hear, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's good. You know, it's a different subject than what we were talking about, but you know that it takes an incredible amount of time and energy to get a conviction to be reviewed again, let alone overturned. Just to get the conviction reviewed again. We have instances where people have confessed that they lied in their the trial that they gave testimony in, that there was evidence that was available at the time that was suppressed by the prosecution or some element that kept that evidence away from the trial and put the defendant in a position where the defendant was more likely to be convicted. You know, we've seen a great deal of that kind of conduct. And the problem is, even when it's very obvious that misconduct has taken place, it takes years to overturn a conviction and get a new trial. And the problem with that is that means that person who is the victim of that wrongful prosecution is sitting in jail for not just months, usually for years, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 20 years before they can get their day in court, a fair day in court, and have that conviction reviewed and hopefully overturned if it was a wrongful conviction. So that's what the It Could Happen to You organization has been about for several years. I've been a board member of It Could Happen to You for many years, and Bill Bastock is the founder of the organization. So I'll be talking with him a little bit later after the program. But I wanted to talk today about what the next steps are since the debt ceiling bill was passed. The debt ceiling bill is referred to as the fiscal responsibility bill. You know that whenever the Republicans are in charge and they get to name a bill, they always put a philosophy in the name. They don't just tell you what the bill is for, like this is the budget bill for, or the debt ceiling bill for 2024. They don't give you something like that. What they do is they give you like a narrative. well, this is the fiscal responsibility bill that's going to save and I forget what they call that, save, invest, and something or other, in their original construction of the debt ceiling bill. They put a philosophy, they put some kind of a narrative into the title that sort of positions what they say the bill is actually about. But we need to get beyond, the penchant, for trying to use normal administrative processes to do abnormal things. We need to get beyond that in order for us to be able to go forward efficiently as a country. So what happens next, now that the debt ceiling issue is addressed, is we have to create the budget for the year that's coming up. That's the year that begins October 1 of this year. It ends September 30th of next year. In my time coming up, and I think in our producer Jim Braun's time, it would be normal for us to have already had the appropriations bills for the year that starts October 1 already have been developed and voted on. It usually would be that the president would have the State of the Union address in January, would have a what they call a budget message in February. Then there'd be negotiations in February, March, and April. And generally, by the time you got to May, this is going back to the 1960s, 1970s, when you got to May, you already had the appropriations bills done. And so everybody that's going to be affected by the structure of the budget that begins October 1 already knows that's going to be taking place, and their administrations are doing what they need to do to tweak whatever they have to tweak in their department operations so that they're going to be able to operate within the budget framework that has been approved. That's just a smooth, normal way that government should be running. But now that we have government by hostage taking, that's no longer the case. Once passed and signed into budget by President Biden, Congress will proceed with the 2024 appropriations process, allocating spending levels to the 13 appropriations subcommittees in the House and Senate that are responsible for drafting bills that fund all federal government agencies. The revised subcommittee allocations will reflect overall totals proposed in the debt ceiling agreement for defense and non-defense agencies. There are some places I read this, they said there were 13 separate bills, but the legislation says there are 12 separate bills that cover the funding for the federal government for one fiscal year, usually divided up into, and I think there are 13 that are named here. Agriculture, commerce, and justice are in one appropriation bill. Defense is another. District of Columbia, for all of you that don't know, District of Columbia is not self-governed. It's actually governed by the Congress of the United States. So it's the city of the District of Columbia is in the budget for the fiscal year that begins October 1 as if it's a program of government, of the federal government. That's really crazy. But then there's energy and water is another piece. Foreign operations is another. Interior is another. Labor, health, and human services are together, along with education is another. The legislative branch is also funded by appropriation. Military construction, transportation, Treasury and Postal Services, and the Veterans Affairs is actually bundled together with housing and urban development. So in the United States, an appropriations bill is legislation to appropriate federal funds to specific federal government departments, agencies, and programs. The money provides funding for operations, personnel, equipment, and activities. Regular appropriations bills are passed annually with the funding they provide covering one fiscal year, as we just described. Appropriations bills under the jurisdictions of the United States House Committee on Appropriations and the United States Senate Committee on Appropriations are the vehicle or manner in which these appropriations bills are developed and put before the Congress to vote on. There are three different types of appropriations bills. There's regular appropriations bills, there are continuing resolutions bills, and there are supplemental appropriations bills. Let's talk about them singularly. Regular appropriations bills are the 12 standard bills that cover the funding for the federal government for one fiscal year to be enacted into law by October 1 of that year. If Congress has not enacted the regular appropriations bills by that time, it may pass a continuing resolution which generally continues the pre-existing appropriations at the same levels as the previous year for a set amount of time. In other words, they would be near the end of September. They actually have to have the appropriations bills in place by the end of September 30th of a year, because October 1 of that year begins a new fiscal year. You can't spend money for the new fiscal year that has not been appropriated. So if you get to near the end of September and you still haven't gotten appropriations bills done for one or more departments of government, you have to make a decision. Generally, what they would do is they would pass a continuing resolution which would say, we're going to keep this part of government going, spending on the same level as we've been spending on for the current fiscal year. We'll keep it going for 2 weeks or 7 weeks or whatever number of weeks they think they require in order for them to be able to get to an agreement on what the budget is going to be for that department of government. So that's what a continuing resolution is for, is to continue the operations of a department until a formal permanent appropriation can be made for that department for that year. Then if Congress fails to pass an appropriations bill or a continuing resolution, or if the president vetoes a bill that has been passed by Congress, it may result in a government shutdown of that department of government. So let's take, for example, I think I talked about Veterans Affairs and Housing and Urban Development are in one appropriations bill. Let's suppose we get to September of this year and there's intransigence. They can't get agreement on what the budget should be for that combined department of Veterans Affairs and Housing and Urban Development. So what would happen is they would try to do a continuing resolution to give them more time to develop an appropriation. Let's suppose that doesn't work out and Congress just can't come together on a number for that department. Then what would happen is that department of government would shut down. Not all of government, but whatever was governed by that appropriation, that would shut down. This means choke points. You have 12 different departments or 13 different departments of government that have to be funded through these appropriations bills, and any one of them can be choked if a faction in the Congress refuses to budge and allow a bill to come forward that sets budgets for a particular department or for departments as a whole. So then there's the third type of appropriations bill is a supplemental appropriations bill, which would add additional funding above and beyond what was originally appropriated at the beginning of the fiscal year for that department. These are bills that can be used for things like disaster relief. So helping people understand why we end up having to borrow money over the course of a year, even though we've had a debt ceiling increase. We got a budget. They always say you should stay within your budget. Right. We should run run like a business or like your family household, right? Because your family household has about $6.2 trillion that they spend, right? So we should all be able to run like you do, right? Right, Willie? Because you got $6.2 trillion in your family, right?
No way. So, maybe $6.2.
So think about, you've got a budget for $6.2 trillion And let's say you anticipated in your budget that you're going to have 40 major snowstorms during the course of the year that are going to be, once in a century type snowstorms.
Right.
But we have 40 of them that happen in the same year. And you budgeted for it.
Right.
You've been planning for it.
Right.
But then it turns out that the year starts, we get into the winter, and we get 40 storms in December.
Right.
We still haven't gotten through January, February, and March yet, right?
Right.
So now we're in real trouble. We already spent our budget for snowstorms, so we know we're going to have to double or triple what we have allocated.
Right.
So let's say each snowstorm cost $1 billion. If you had to budget for 20 more snowstorms, that's $20 more billion that you don't have because you don't have a revenue stream that supports that.
Right.
So that means you have to borrow money from the future to pay for the expenses that you're incurring today.
That's correct.
That's what borrowing is for. Okay.
Right.
That's not tax and spend. That's not being liberal or illiberal. If it's your house that got picked up by the water and was sent 16 miles away, on the side of a mountain, or if that's your car, or that's your plumbing, or that's your electric grid, and so on, that got destroyed because of a flood or a storm or earthquake or whatever that occurred, you wouldn't want anybody talking about, oh, that's liberal politics. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be fiscally, responsible and not help you to get out of to overcome whatever happened as a result of that disaster. You wouldn't want that to occur. Right. But the same thing happens when, the pandemic hit. You ended up with, sometimes, 150, 250, sometimes 350,000 people in a day were getting infected by this COVID-19 virus. And of course, we know the horror stories, and over 1 million people, were killed by this virus. So of course, you were going to have to mount some kind of a response. And since you didn't budget for it because you didn't have coronavirus 19 written into a line in your budget that you passed in 2019 for the year that began October 1 of 2019 and ended September 30th of 2020. You didn't have a line in there for COVID-19 because it didn't exist. But by the time you got to the end of 2020, you were several tens of billions of dollars. In fact, you were actually several hundred billions of dollars in the hole in the amount of money you had to come up with to be able to test people, to be able to keep the disease from spreading, to be able to vaccinate people, to be able to prevent people from getting this virus in the first place, to be able to help our businesses to be able to stay intact, so they could survive to the other end of this pandemic. I mean, a whole range of things that cost humongous amounts of money that were not budgeted for. So that's how we end up with debt. And what you have to do is you have to own the debt. You have to say, okay, this bad thing happened. We had to put the money up to be able to address it. We're going to have to pay this bill off. Are we going to take 50 years to pay the bill off? Are we going to take 20 years to pay the bill off? Are we going to take 5 years to take the bill off? We're going to take 1 year and pay the bill off. We have to figure out what we're going to do and then do it. You have to be intentional. You can't not be intentional.
Right. Well, American people, I feel, do that. I know for me, every month I go through budgeting. Like something comes up, I got to spend, and make my budget tight, and there's certain things I got to take. So we do this most people do it every month. Mm-hmm. People like you that got money, you don't have to worry about that.
You just spend the money, because you know more is going to be in your account anyway, because money's just pouring in. Right.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about you.
That's what I mean, me.
Yeah,
right. And I feel real good about it. You don't hear me whining. Okay.
No. But for most of us, most Americans got a budget, and I don't understand why you got professionals who, I know why. Everybody's trying to self-interest. They trying to put more money in their pockets.
And what it is people are pimping circumstances to make it appear as if they're the ones being efficient and accountable, and make you appear to be somebody who is irresponsible and being loose.
Right.
But the reality is when disaster hits, you have to respond to the disaster.
That's correct.
When there used to be a street here and now it's just mud, you have to clear all of that water out, all that mud out of people's houses and people's driveways and down the street, and the drains and the sewers and all that stuff has to be cleared and then cleaned, and then has to be reconstructed because there's damage that has been done.
Right.
In addition to the inconvenience, there's all the damage that's done by those disasters. So you have to budget for that. Sometimes you end up with instead of having 4% of the people being unemployed, you end up with 6% of the people being unemployed. You didn't budget for those other 2% of those people.
Right.
Do you leave them out in the street with no ability to pay their rent, without being able to buy food or buy clothing and so on? You couldn't do that. You'd have to provide some sort of a support system for people that are economically in a disaster. So that's what governance is. That's what having a government is all about. It's doing collectively for us those things that cannot be done easily if they had to be done individually.
Yeah, but that's the problem, Mr. Hare. I think government, a lot of those guys, political figures, they know all this stuff is going to happen. They even probably plan for it, but they also plan, okay, I got to get my agenda across. I got to adhere to my constituents. I got to put more money in my pocket. So when this come up, here's what I'm going to do. Yep. And I think that's what they plan for, so that they can get their agenda across.
I think you're absolutely right. And just think about it from just pure sense logic. If you're so focused on debt, and deficits, if that's what the right wing were so concerned about, why would you lower taxes in 2017 by as much as $450 billion a year? Why would you lower the amount of revenue that you were able to collect at the same time that you say you were concerned about increasing debt?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. That's it right there. You hit it right there.
And then if you think about the budget that exists, the budget framework that was approved in order to get the debt ceiling authorization passed, puts about $880 billion in the hands of the Defense Department, only puts about $705, maybe $710 billion into the rest of government. That's all the rest of what the government does. Defense gets $885 or $86 billion, and the rest of government gets $705 billion. And the Republicans weren't satisfied with that. They wanted to be able to knock out at least 22% of that 705, which means $140 billion would have been taken off the top of those programs that are the things that actually serve you. That's your support for Medicaid. That's your heating, energy, and assistance program supports. That's your support for public schools. Your supports for your parks around the country, the infrastructure of your country, all those things that are in the non-discretionary part of the budget. They wanted to cut those things by more than 20%. And they wanted to reduce taxes on top of that. And the thing is, there are millions of people in this country that clap whenever they go to these people go to these meetings and they huff and puff and talk all this right-wing stuff. There's millions of people that sit in the audience and clap and act like this makes sense, when the people that are going to get hurt by these decisions are them. It's just hard to process. But the appropriations bills are one part of a larger government process. I just wanted to make sure people understand this context. There is authority in the Constitution that says that it's the legislature that has to be the ones who appropriate money. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution states, quote, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law." So this is what gives Congress the power to make these appropriations, because laws begin in the House of Representatives. So if it's the House of Representatives who make the laws that govern appropriations, that means that even though Article 14 says that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned, which sounds like it says that, you can't not pay your bills. Simultaneously, you still have to appropriate money to pay the bills, and appropriating the money has to begin in the House of Representatives, in Congress. So it creates this choke point. And what we're learning now is anytime a choke point comes into existence or already exists that has not been exploited yet, the Republicans, if they're in control of a legislative part of of that level of government, they will use that choke point to stranglehold you and force you to have to do things you don't want to do that conform to what they want you to do. That's the model of governance that exists in the United States right now.
Yeah.
So we're on. We're going to talk about this on the other side of the break. We're on the shutdown horizon. I said all that stuff to bring us to this point that we are now going to be facing shutdown season. It won't happen right away. It probably won't happen until August or September. But you're going to see that the Republicans will use this choke point to be able to suffocate the government to try to get other concessions, as if the debt ceiling bill that was passed was never enacted. So hopefully we're making some kind of sense. Look forward to talking to you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you on a second.
Protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan here. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome back, Willie.
Welcome, everybody.
All right. So listen, I went to an article in the Washington Examiner, which you probably are saying, well, why was he reading the Washington Examiner? It's a very conservative, right-wing newsletter or newspaper. But I try to look at a lot of different sources of information. I don't want to feel like I'm challenged because somebody's right wing that, they don't have any legitimacy in whatever it is they put on the table. My responsibility is to assess what they're talking about, determine whether it's true or not true from my own research, and then share with you what I think about what it is that they are saying. But Ryan King wrote an article called Debt Limit, the Government Spending Standoff that could come next. This was written just a couple of days ago, June 2nd, in the Washington Examiner. And what King forecasts is that a government shutdown still lingers on the horizon. A first ever national default has been averted, but already some Republicans, according to the article, are eyeing a government shutdown style fight that could be next. Dozens of Republican legislators remain upset that not enough food heat, education, healthcare, and housing was taken away from the poor and low-income Americans through this debt ceiling fight. So they are now focusing on their collective leverage through the appropriations process to extract additional concessions. Fortunately, there are a few traps baked into the debt limit deal that could foil their attempts. That's not going to stop them from trying. Conditioning, quoting Representative Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, he says, conditioning an increase in the debt limit upon opaquely negotiated concessions from the president is one way to get things done. But we can and should control spending more transparently and precisely using powerful congressional tools such as the upcoming appropriations bills. That was his tweet just late last week. Representative Ralph Norman, Republican of South Carolina, on the same issue, he says, quote, "What leadership has got to do is bear down on every appropriations committee of the 12 and show us up front what they're going to be advocating for, and it's going to take severe cuts," he says. "And if it's a bait and switch operation, which is what we had on this bill, the debt ceiling bill, we're going to fight." So some fiscal experts have given mixed reviews to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is the name of the debt ceiling increase bill that was just signed by President Biden. So some experts have given mixed interpretations as to whether or not a government shutdown is possible, given the language in the bill outlining an automatic 1% cut. A top Democratic examiner told the Washington Examiner that it is indeed still a threat. In other words, a number of the hard right-wing congressmen intend to ignore the debt ceiling bill and to extract other budget concessions during the appropriations process. In other words, they've never met a choke point that they didn't love. So they apparently feel that the final provision, as they translated it into text, does not automatically fund the government or prevent a shutdown. Even Democratic leadership, as well as the White House, is acknowledging a government shutdown fight may be on the horizon, in spite of the fact that the language of the bill says that in the event that budget appropriations are not agreed upon in time, that they would be in effect by October 1 of this year. If that were to occur, that the government would automatically shift back to a budget that would be 1% lower than the amount of money that was spent in the 2023 fiscal year. So if the 2023 fiscal year spent $10,000 and you didn't have a appropriations bill in place by October 1, you would take 1% of that $10,000, which would be $100, and you'd have to reduce your budget to now be $9,900 rather than $10,000 for the year that begins October 1 of this year. That was written into the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which provided the increase in borrowing to increase the debt ceiling. So there is a budget framework already in place that the budget would automatically default to. So since that is already in place, to go against that would require the Congress or people in Congress to ignore the Fiscal Responsibility Act and just start the budget crisis stuff all over again.
All right.
So we according to Chuck Schumer, he says we have to avoid a government shutdown. There are some on the hard right, just as they wanted to default, will try to push for a government shutdown. In other words, keep in mind, these people, they really want to disrupt.
Yeah.
They wanted to disrupt and literally stop the operation of the government of the United States unless the people submit to a hostile takeover by these right-wing Republicans and do everything the way that they want things done. That's really what this seems to be all about. Yeah. So Schumer says we'll try to do everything that we can to avoid a shutdown, and there are provisions in the bill that make that less likely. But as Schumer alluded to, the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 should pacify GOP attempts at an appropriations process shakedown, but it may not stop them from trying to shake down everybody by using these choke points. Because at the end of the day, an appropriations bill has to begin in Congress. Congress is the House of Representatives, or the Congress we're talking about is the House of Representatives. If the House of Representatives is majority Republican, then Kevin McCarthy is the ringleader of the majority of the House of Representatives. If his caucus refuses to put a appropriations bill forward that makes sense, and then they're not able to get an appropriations bill done for a particular department of government or for all the departments of government as a whole, the Republicans appear to be fine with that. Their thing is, well, then let's not have a government. Let's just shut everything down, and then we won't spend any money. Send everybody home. Save the money that we normally would have paid out for paychecks. Unemployment benefits are cheaper than regular salaries. I mean, it's all kind of craziness,
Well, it's just basically a chokehold. You guys gonna do what we say, or you're not gonna have nothing. So,
right?
Give us what we want, and that's basically
it's our way or no way.
Right.
That's what they're saying.
That's what it's about.
So now, hopefully, the public would look at this and say that the Republicans appear as though they're reneging on their budgeting agreement if they attempt to play hardball in the appropriations process. This Washington Examiner's Joshua Hutter said that this debt limit deal sets the budget numbers. Republicans will significantly own these numbers. They got pretty decent terms, so it looks a little bit irresponsible and unreasonable for them to turn back and say, well, actually, that deal we negotiated in the past, it's not the deal that we wanted, so therefore we want more concessions. That's what the Republicans are saying. And what the Washington Examiner's Jeff Hooter is saying is that may not play well, for the public. I'm not sure about that. That may play well with a large enough piece of the public that these Republicans may get elected again. And if they get elected again, they'll push harder to do the same things tomorrow that they've been doing yesterday. The debt limit agreement sets the top line figures for discretionary spending by keeping spending growth down until 2024. So what that means is spending for the rest of 2023 has to stay at the same level that it is right now. Can't go above that. So 2024's expenditures are going to be essentially the same as 2023. 2025's expenditures will be 1% lower than what they were in 2024. That's the way that this thing sets up. So even though it's not like, wiping out $31 trillion worth of debt, it does put you on a glide path where you're moving away from deficits so that you can start building some surpluses in future years. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's the path that they're trying to get on. And so this translates to, let me just state what I said earlier again. The debt limit agreement sets the top line figures for discretionary spending by keeping spending growth down until 2024 before allowing roughly a 1% annual increase in discretionary expenditures in 2025. This translates to military spending clocking in at $886 billion for fiscal year 2024 and military non-discretionary spending at non-military discretionary spending at $704 billion, according to NBC's analysis. Roughly 67% or 149 members of the House GOP backed the debt limit deal, while 71% voted against it. I found it very interesting. 165 Democrats voted for the debt ceiling deal. 17 more Democrats voted for the deal than Republicans voted for the deal, and it was the Republicans' bill. Somebody help me understand what's going on there. Wow. So if the bad faith negotiator concerns don't deter the GOP from girding for more concessions, there may be a few procedural hiccups in the way. A key silver lining for conservatives in this debt limit deal was a provision that stimulated that there would be an automatic 1% cut on discretionary spending if Congress fails to pass the 12 appropriations bills by January or before January 2024. This is meant to provide a strong incentive for Congress to pass these bills. It would take a majority of both houses and the president's signature to override this provision of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, according to David Wessel, senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. But that stimulation may prove to be a double-edged sword for two reasons. First, the automatic 1% cut would undercut the depth of cuts Republicans may hypothetically seek. Remember, the Republicans originally wanted a 22% cut in discretionary spending, across the board. The deal that was actually struck with Joe Biden only reduces discretionary spending by 1%, and that doesn't begin until 2025. If the whole point is that if you don't want spending cuts at 1%, then with the demand to cut spending by 5%, you don't have any leverage. According to Brian Rettle, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, he says you don't have any leverage then because the default is 1%. In other words, if you were to advocate for a 5% cut right now in discretionary spending for 2024, 2025, 2026, the response of the Democrats would be, we're not going to pay any attention to you because we already have legislation that covers what the cap is on expenditures are. You
mean Republicans, not Democrats?
No, I mean the Democrats would respond to the Republicans by saying instead of paying attention to your request for a 5% or a 20% cut in discretionary expenditures, the Democrats would say we already have a 1% cut that was passed in law. Why would we pass a law to undo the law that we already passed? That's just stupid, right?
Right.
So the Republicans are upset about that. So the likelihood is the Republicans will probably try to get another law passed to undo the Fiscal Responsibility Act so they could then do another attack, on discretionary spending. I also want people to understand that they're talking about the discretionary part of the budget. The federal budget spends $6.2, maybe $6.3 trillion. Understand that the portion that's discretionary is $886 billion in discretionary defense spending and $704 billion in discretionary non-defense spending. That's only $1.6 trillion. So out of that $6.2 trillion that the federal government spends, only $1.6 trillion of that is discretionary. The remaining $4.6 trillion that's spent by the federal government is spent in mandatory spending. That's Social Security, that's Medicare, I forget all the other pieces that go into the mandatory part of the budget. Obviously, interest payments, on our previous borrowing and so on. That portion of our budget represents $4.6 trillion. So there's no cap, there's no 1%, cut in expenditures on that side of the budget. So you're still going to be growing the deficits significantly year in and year out because inflation is going to take up another 4 or 5% growth in those expenditures.
Right.
So, we're still not in a position that we're on a glide path that takes us toward fiscal solvency. And it just seems to me, as we talked about on Friday, at the end of the day, you have to be intentional about your deficits and your debt.
Right.
You have to make a decision that we borrowed from the future in order to pay for unanticipated costs that we incurred in the past. Well, now you got to pay for the stuff you borrowed from the future.
Right.
That means you got to go into your pocket. You can't go into some magic money. You got to go into your pocket.
Yep.
And where you were getting 13 cents on the dollar, that you pay back to the federal government in terms of taxes, you may have to pay 20 cents on the dollar to pay the federal government, for the cost of providing our collective services to ourselves as a society, you may have to add that additional 6 or 7% taken out of your check so that we can pay off the bills that we incurred yesterday, where we borrowed money from tomorrow. Well, tomorrow is here.
Right.
Today is yesterday's tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay, and so we have to find the will to go into today and pay out today for what we borrowed from tomorrow, so that tomorrow can come. Otherwise, tomorrow is going to be dragged behind itself with anvils and 10,000-pound weights dragging behind it. And imagine if you had to run a race and you had 3 or 4 2-ton weights dragging behind you. You wouldn't be running very fast, would you?
No, you wouldn't. No.
Well, that's how our economy is going forward in the future, because we have to drag all of this debt that we incurred in the past when we borrowed money from the future. So the energy that we should have helping us to run in the future, that energy is already being taken up to pay for what we gave to the past. We've got to make a courageous decision. It means that people are going to have to accept higher taxes being paid for a particular period of time until we get this debt issue resolved. We know that the reason why we have programs are because people have issues, but we should be designing ways to solve the issues, not treat the issues. It's not good enough just to treat. If people need food, giving them another piece of money for food every month, it may help them.
It helps us a little bit.
It doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't solve problems.
Something is happening that they're not in a position to be able to get food for themselves.
Yeah.
Solve that problem. Is it because they're not learned enough? They don't have enough skill? There's no jobs in the area where they are? In the old days, there's something that was called the Great Migration. I don't know if you all remember this, where all of these people left the South after the World War II and migrated, up north, because they migrated up north, not just because they were escaping from the racism and whatnot, the apartheid existence in the South, but also because there were job openings in Bethlehem Steel, and Republic Steel and Houdaille Industries and Twin Industries and so on.
And they was able to get homes, quality homes, and all of that.
And they left their families. And they moved to where the jobs were. And once they got, 7 or 8 paychecks together, they called up, honey, and say, honey, babe, pack up. Okay. Leave that house. It's a ramshackle shack anyway. Leave that house, get on the train, and I'll pick you up, in New York City.
And that's how I learned my history, by watching movies that would just show that migration. Realizing, especially for us black people of color, black people, the migration. Movies taught, not school or history books. I probably didn't read enough history books, but TV, movies taught me that.
But see, it's important for people to understand that it used to be the norm in this country that you would go to where the jobs were. So if you know how to be a grinder, but they're shutting down the kinds of operations in your area where they use grinders, but you know that in Sparrow Fields, Maryland, they're still using grinders and they have a lot of jobs for those kind of people, you would move to Sparrow Fields, Maryland.
Right.
You'd get a job there. Then you'd call up your honey, or your wife or your husband, and you say, you meet me down here. We're going to get a house down here because this is where the money is.
Right.
And then you'll just call your parents. You might not be able to visit with them. You have to call your parents. And so on.
I see that happening here in Buffalo with a lot of Indian Muslim people. They're doing well here. They're creating businesses and they are prospering. And a lot of them are coming here because of that reason.
You don't try to say to the country, you have to bring the job to me. I just want to be able to wake up in the morning, turn over, step out of the bed, and slide into my job. And I want you to put my clothes on, I want you to brush my teeth, feed me. It's just crazy the way that we behave and whatnot.
Yeah.
You go where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
See, so part of this Washington Examiner article talked about what I refer to as grabbing for straws. He said, perhaps the main point of leverage Republicans would have in the appropriations process is the specter of a government shutdown if the debt ceiling bill allows one to go through. The last government shutdown concluded in early 2019. Most experts, according to the Washington Examiner, believe that the language of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 does not inherently prevent a shutdown by funding the government automatically if the Congress fails to pass the 12 appropriations bills. However, others interpret the 1% automatic cut language differently and believe that there is a strong argument to be made that the bill guarantees the government won't shut down in the fall. And I think that interpretation is the correct interpretation, but it doesn't mean that Republicans will accept it. You know what I mean? They may just cause a big argument over this thing and a showdown over this thing, regardless of the fact that there's already legislation that governs what the budget has to be for 2024. So Democrats appear far less willing to give in on the appropriations process after going through this debt limit battle. So they may be a little bit more strident, a little stronger than they were during this debt ceiling crisis. I want to quickly, I know we only got about 5 or 10 minutes.
Five.
Oh, see, you just squeezed me off just that quick. Ron DeSantis, my title of this is Ron DeSantis, Where Truth Comes to Die. This was based on an article written by Jennifer Bowers Bainey in Mediaite. And the Ron DeSantis camp posted a video of the presidential candidate defining the cultural buzzword woke just days after Donald Trump said he doesn't like it anymore and insisted that half the people can't define it. He said, Trump says he doesn't like to use the word woke because people don't know what it means. And so NBC reporter...
No, if you're asleep, no, you don't know what it means.
Exactly. NBC reporter Donna Dasher Burns said at Saturday's campaign stop in Iowa, that's obviously a big part of your messaging. What do you say to that, Donald? And DeSantis answers, she asked that question to Ron DeSantis. He says, look, we know what woke is. It's a form of cultural Marxism. That's what DeSantis said. It's about putting merit and achievement behind identity politics, and it's basically a war on the truth. And he says...
Their truth.
Yeah.
Their truth.
He says, so, and as that has infected institutions, it has corrupted institutions. He says, so you got to be willing to fight the woke. We've done that in Florida, and we proudly consider ourselves a state where woke goes to die. Just stupid, right? So he says, woke is a form of cultural Marxism. It's a war on truth. I don't like the term woke because I hear the term woke. It's just a term they use. Half the people can't define it. They don't even know what it is. So DeSantis has said he's running for president to eradicate woke ideology in the United States. And when asked by Fox News, a Fox News host, why it was the right time for him to run for president, DeSantis answered, well, because, quote, everyone knows that I'm the nominee. If I'm the nominee, I will beat Biden and I will serve 2 terms and I will be able to destroy leftism in this country and leave woke ideology on the dustbin of history.
Well, I out of everybody, I am more afraid of Ron DeSantis than probably anybody else.
I am so glad you said that because
I really am.
He is something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
There was an article written by Chauncey DeVega in Salon magazine on the same subject. A contest between Trump and DeSantis is an opportunity, of course, for the media to make a lot of money. That's what they would like. But Trump and DeSantis are both neo-fascists with a deep contempt for America's multicultural, pluralistic society. Because the American mainstream news media is an institution and many of the political class and general public is desperate for a return to normalcy and the accompanying sense of false security, Ron DeSantis is being presented as a more reasonable, viable, and responsible alternative to the outright fascism and unrepentant demagoguery of Donald Trump and his MAGA movement.
Yeah, he's more cunning. He's cunning.
Yep. So Americans must ask themselves if simply defeating Donald Trump is enough to preserve some semblance of the American democracy. Would the election of Ron DeSantis preserve the multicultural democracy America perceives itself to be, or will it be the final nail in the coffin of that American dream? No one should see Ronald DeSantis as a savior for the Republican Party. He will not bring it back to normal. Anyone who thinks that Ron represents the establishment is deluding themselves. Ron is an authoritarian, or is as authoritarian as Trump is, as is evidenced by his fight with Walt Disney, his war on librarians, and his hatred towards LGBTQ individuals. He is dangerous because he realizes that the future of the GOP is Trumpism on steroids. Ron DeSantis, his anti-democratic bullying behavior, hostility to education and diversity, demagogic rejection of gays and people of color, attraction to violence and insistence on the make-believe woke virus illustrates how Trump's cancerous influence continues to drive Republican thinking. I really needed to get this in. I hope you'll give me time to say this.
Yeah, go ahead. You got all the time in the world.
Incredibly, Ron DeSantis wouldn't recognize the truth if it kissed him in the face. Ron DeSantis claimed that it was the American Revolution that caused people to question slavery. He said, nobody had questioned it before we decided as Americans that we were endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights and that we were all created equal. Then that birthed abolition movements. That's the history that he once taught. He then said that in Florida, we require the truth about American history to be taught in our classrooms. We will not allow schools to twist history to align with an ideological agenda. So this mess that you just heard me say that Ron DeSantis is quoted as saying, he thinks that's the truth.
Wow.
In truth, the United States as a government did not act against slavery in any form until 1807, 30 years after the United States was born. And even though there was a prohibition against the Atlantic slave trade, the slave trade was still going on in the United States up until the Civil War. And he says, and the United States acted in key ways to protect slavery as an institution right up to the Civil War. Remember, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1852, which required that if you saw somebody who you thought looked like they might be a runaway slave, you were required to report that to your local sheriff and have them find that person, capture that person, and send them back down south to be re-enslaved again. That was the America that Ron DeSantis says, was the wellspring of abolition of slavery. Most egregiously, the idea that no one questions slavery erases enslaved peoples themselves who were active in resisting slavery both as individuals and collectively in refusing the logic and legality of their enslavement. In other words, African people have been resisting slavery since 1492, since they were first brought over here in 1520, by the Archbishop of the Indies, Bartolome Las Casas, in 1520 to Hispaniola. African people have been resisting slavery ever since that day. Mm-hmm. They weren't waiting on the American Revolution, to do that. And the American Revolution enshrined slavery in the Constitution. It didn't abolish slavery. This is the kind of truth that Ron DeSantis believes in. And this is why people like him must be kept away from power, must be kept away from control over our education. Thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. I know we had a lot we tried to cover today, but we do look forward to talking to you all on Wednesday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.